Hello everyone, my name is Grace and today I'm going to be talking about the COVID-19 Pfizer vaccine. So, COVID needs no introduction, yay 2020, and I just wanted to address just the sheer amount of information as well as misinformation that is out there right now about both the virus and the vaccines. It was very difficult for me to sift through all of it and condense it down into a 12-minute presentation. But I just decided to focus on what I thought was the most interesting, so hopefully this is a good representation of all of the information that's out there right now. And I want to give you a brief outline of what I'm going to be going over before I dive into the details. So first I'm going to be talking about the virus itself, SARS-CoV-2, and then I'm going to be talking about how it's transmitted and how it causes symptoms. I'm going to talk about what those symptoms are and how they can lead to death. I'm going to talk about what an mRNA vaccine is, how it works, and what its ingredients are. And I'm going to be talking about the efficacy and safety of the Pfizer vaccine, as well as some misconceptions surrounding it. Hopefully clear those up. So this is the coronavirus. It is a beta coronavirus, and it is a positive sense single-stranded RNA vaccine. The genome is about 30 kilobase pairs long, and it encodes for 4 different structural proteins that are seen here, which form an envelope about it. So we have this nucleocapsid protein, which complexes with the RNA. We have an envelope protein, which forms a protective shell around the RNA. We have this membrane glycoprotein here, which helps to fuse with the host membrane. And we have a spike protein here, which is going to recognize and bind to a receptor on the cell of the target cell that the virus is trying to infect. And so what happens is that this spike protein binds this ACE2 receptor on the host cell and then enters into the cell and it releases all of its RNA. And this RNA is going to be replicated and proteins are going to be transcribed from the RNA. And then the proteins and the RNA are going to assemble together into new viruses, and they're going to burst from the cell, causing cell lysis and death. So COVID-19 is mainly transmitted through droplets, and these are droplets that are larger than 5 micrometers. So since they're so large, they can only travel about 1 meter, which is why we have the 6-foot distance, social distancing rules. And why we also wear masks, because the masks can prevent the spread of these larger sized droplets. It can also be transmitted through fomites or direct contact, which is when these droplets are spread to objects or to your hands, and then somebody else touches those objects or your hands, and they are then infected. There's a wide range of symptoms associated with COVID-19, usually flu-like symptoms. The ACE2 receptor that COVID binds to is most often found in your upper respiratory tract, which is why you have loss of taste and smell, because the virus will damage those tissues, and also your lungs, which is why you cough so much. And most people, their immune systems are capable of fighting off the virus and then returning to normal pretty easily. However, there are a couple cases where some people will have a pretty severe overreaction in their immune system to the virus, sometimes called a cytokine storm, where you just have this uncontrolled influx of cytokines and chemokines and just all these inflammatory signals that upregulate the inflammatory response, which causes a lot of fluid leakage into the lungs, which leads to pneumonia and acute respiratory distress syndrome, and this is what often leads to death. So, as you can see, it's kind of hard to pin down an exact mortality rate for the disease because it's so varied over time and location, but globally, as of April 25th, 2021, there was about 149 million confirmed cases since the beginning of the pandemic and over 3 million deaths. And it was the 3rd leading cause of death in the U.S. in 2020, after cancer and heart disease. However, on December 11th, 2020, the FDA issued the first emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine. So the emergency use authorization EUA is a little bit different than the normal FDA approval, just because there's a little bit less data that was submitted than there usually is for a full approval, but the FDA decided that with all the data they had available, the vaccine was very safe and effective, and so it would be more beneficial to approve it for the public to use. So it is an mRNA vaccine, which is very cool because what they've done is they've taken the viral genome and they've found the gene that encodes for just the spike protein, and they have isolated that piece of mRNA and gotten rid of all of the rest of it. And then that piece of RNA is injected into the cell of the patient, or not the patient, but just the person who's being vaccinated. It's injected into their cell, and then their cell is going to transcribe that mRNA into a spike protein. So your cell is doing the work for the vaccine. And then this protein that's been transcribed is then recognized by that same cell as foreign, and then the cell is going to display that antigen on its surface, which is going to cause this immune response, and then the production of antibodies by the body. It's pretty cool. So mRNA vaccines, although this is the first one that is commercially available, they've actually been under development since at least 1990. And so this is the Dr. Kariko, who has devoted her career to researching this for at least 3 decades, longer probably. And some of the challenges to development of this, which is why it has not been available before this, is because mRNA is pretty unstable, and so it's degraded pretty quickly within the cell. And also because it has a high innate immunogenicity, which means that it stimulates a pretty high, strong immune response, which is both good and bad because we want a strong immune response because we want to get antibodies to have immunity to the disease, but also bad because we don't want that immune response to be too strong so that the side effects are debilitating. And then also because they've struggled with developing an efficient method of delivery in vivo, so a way of getting that mRNA to the inside of the cell to where it needs to be so that it can be transcribed. But there's a lot of benefits to using mRNA vaccines. It's very safe because there's no possible way of getting the disease from the mRNA vaccine. It's very efficient because it stimulates a strong immune response within the body. And then the production is very, very easy and very simple because we have these long-established protocols for how to develop RNA, how to isolate it, and how to get it in very high yields. So it's very efficient. And so what they've done to solve 2 of the problems that I mentioned before, the stability of the mRNA and how to get it where it needs to go, is they've developed this piece of technology called a lipid nanoparticle, which is basically just this artificial lipid bilayer, which is going to surround the mRNA, and I'll bring it into the cell, in through the plasma membrane of the cell, when mRNA will be released there, and so then it can be transcribed into the spike proteins. That's pretty cool. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what all of the ingredients in the mRNA vaccine are. I'm going to go through each of the main categories so you can kind of understand everything that's in it. So first we have the mRNA transcript, and this is just the spike protein. And then we also have the lipid nanoparticles, which I mentioned above. And so the lipid nanoparticles, just their main function, is to transport the mRNA across the cell membrane into the cytoplasm, where the mRNA can be transcribed into the spike protein. And here I've listed all of the lipids which are included in these lipid nanoparticles. I don't have enough time to get into what each of them do, but it is very interesting. Then we have a buffer solution, which is going to regulate the pH of the vaccine, make sure it's at the right pH so it's safe in the body. As you can see, this is a pretty common buffer used in the laboratory. Then we have some salts and some sugars, and their main purpose is to adjust the osmolarity of the vaccine so that it's at the same osmotic pressure as your body. Again, so these are just common table salts and table sugar. So here I am. This is when I got the Pfizer vaccine, so I thought it would be fun to include that in this presentation. So the vaccine is very safe and it's very effective. There were 20,000 individuals that participated in the clinical trials, and it was 95% efficacious at preventing laboratory-confirmed COVID-19, and 95%, that is very efficient. And so it is also very safe. Some side effects are pretty common, some mild to moderate inflammation, but you want that because it's a good sign, because it means that you're reproducing an immune response. And then also the side effects are stronger after the second dose, but again, this makes more sense because the second dose is what's stimulating the secondary response, which is the stronger immune response, which is going to last longer. And then the risks, the only notable risk from this vaccine is a severe allergic reaction, which is very rare, but some people have had some allergic reactions to components of the vaccine, anaphylactic shock, but it's very rare. It's about 4.7 cases per million doses administered. But this vaccine has reduced hospitalizations and death rates in the United States, and you can especially see it happening in Israel, where they've had a lot of vaccinations over there. But it's pretty hard to get a solid number on that because the vaccine is still being administered and large portions of the populations have not yet been vaccinated. So here's some common myths that are surrounding the vaccine, and I think it's pretty important to talk about these because there's a pretty high hesitancy rate right now in the United States about trying to get this vaccine. A recent poll, 44% of US adults said that they were unsure or unlikely to get the vaccine, which is not very good because it will protract how long it takes us to recover from the pandemic, because we need about 80 to 85% immunity in the population in order to achieve herd immunity. So here are some myths about the vaccine. So there are no long-term side effects of the Pfizer vaccine. Historically, long-term side effects from vaccines occurred within 6 to 7 weeks after the vaccine. Weeks, not months or years. And the vaccine was monitored for at least 8 weeks during the clinical trials, and now it has been months since it was first started giving out, and no long-term symptoms have been seen. It cannot make you sick with COVID-19. Again, it is only an mRNA transcript of a single protein, the spike protein, which cannot infect you with COVID. It will not enter your DNA. The mRNA never enters the nucleus of the cell, and it is degraded as soon as it is transcribed into the spike protein. It is safe for pregnant women. No side effects for pregnancy have been reported. The vaccine cannot be mandated by the CDC. It can only be mandated by state governments or by employers. It is important that you should still wear your mask even after you've been vaccinated, and it's just primarily because we don't really know yet how long the immunity lasts. So some people who had the vaccine some people who had COVID after about 6 to 7 months, they were tested again. About 90% of them were still immune, but there was about 10% who were no longer immune to it. And so it's important to still wear a mask because, again, we just don't know how long that immunity is going to last. And then you should also get vaccinated even if you've had COVID, again, for the same reason that I just explained. And then we have this question that's coming up now because we're seeing a lot of new COVID variants come up. What about COVID variants? How is Pfizer helpful against those? We've seen this Brazil variant that's broken through the COVID vaccine. Well, so what we know is that it really depends on what the variant is, because it has to have a mutation on the spike protein, which is what the Pfizer vaccine will produce antibodies against. And so if there's a mutation on the spike protein for the Brazil variant, this lowers the effectiveness of the Pfizer vaccine, but it doesn't completely destroy it. And also, what's nice is that these vaccines would be very, very simple for producers of them to just simply change a couple of amino acids in the sequence of the mRNA to adjust to fit with this mutation. So in the case of mutations, it's actually very simple that with the mRNA for them to be fixed. So here are my sources, and I hope that this was a good presentation. I hope you all have a lovely day. Thank you.